الله 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 ما لنا مولى سوى الله 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 ما لنا مولى سوى الله.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا جاءكم المؤمنات مهاجرات فامتحنوهن الله أعلم بإيمانهن فإن علمتموهن مؤمنات فلا ترجعوهن إلى الكفار لا هن حل لهم ولا هم يحلون لهن وآتوهم ما أنفقوا ولا جناح عليكم أن تنكحوهن إذا آتيتموهن أجورهن ولا تمسكوا بعصم الكوافر واسألوا ما أنفقتم وليسألوا ما أنفقوا ذلكم حكم الله يحكم بينكم والله عليم حكيم. وإن فاتكم شيء من أزواجكم إلى الكفار فعاقبتم فآتوا الذين ذهبت أزواجهم مثل ما أنفقوا واتقوا الله الذي أنتم به مؤمنون. صدق الله مولانا العظيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us the ability to be here and to reflect upon these two verses of Surah Mumtahinah. These two verses are in regards to it's connected to Sulh Hudaybiyah, that treaty, that contract, and it's in regards to some women that were coming over, okay, from the Meccan side, and what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in regards to the women coming from Mecca to Medina. So firstly, before we begin translating the first ayah, the context is Sulh Hudaybiyah, which took place in the 6th Hijri, okay? And as you know, it's a famous story that it was unfair, but there was hikmah inside of it as well, why the Prophet ﷺ settled for an unfair contract, although the Sahaba were not so delighted about those terms. And one of the conditions in there was what? That if any Meccans came from, somebody wanted to become Muslim, come to Medina, they had to send them back. And then the vice versa, what's the vice versa? Somebody from Medina goes to Mecca, they don't have to return them back. So this was an unfair. Although if you look at it, if somebody goes from Medina to Mecca, that means he left Islam basically. We don't really want them back. It also shows a desperation of the kuffar that they're looking for manpower, where Islam wasn't in a desperate situation. Because Muslims are looking at it like this, that if a Muslim goes from Medina to Mecca, that means he's left Islam. We don't want them back. Whereas a Meccan who comes into Islam and comes here, they want all the human resources. They want that person back. So anyway, there was these terms. So there's long story, right? Prophet ﷺ at some point Someone didn't want to write that he's Rasulullah, and then we have different lessons that we learned from it. Rasulullah Sallallahu Sahaba didn't like that contract, but Rasulullah saw this hikmah in it, this wisdom, and then Rasulullah upheld whatever the contracts. As you know, as Muslims, we always uphold our contracts, whether with Muslims or with the non-Muslims. So Rasulullah upheld this unfair treaty. So there's stories like, for example, there's a story of Suhail. This was a disbeliever, and his son who had accepted Islam and who was coming while they're doing this treaty, before they signed it, the contract was written. Before the signing was done, his son came over, accepting Islam. He wants to come over. So Prophet told Suhail that, listen, it hasn't been signed yet. So the contract starts working after the sign. It hasn't. So just he wants to come, allow him, and he said no. So Prophet tried to, I think, motivate him. I forgot how that you should just let it go, because you haven't signed the contract yet. After we sign the contract, then we're not going to allow anyone to come. But he said no. He threatened in different ways. So then Rasulullah said, go back. So like that, Rasulullah didn't want to make anything more difficult for anyone. Then there were some events where once the contract was signed, obviously the men were not allowed, right, to go from, they're being persecuted from the Mecca, they're not allowed to come into Rasulullah, or else Rasulullah would just send them back. But the contract said men, it didn't say women. So some of the women came this way, who left their husbands and came over the side. So Rasulullah said, we don't have to honor this part, because in the contract it says men. And these women, if they have left, they've come into Islam and they've come here, right? They've left they're non-Muslims, and they left the non-Muslim husbands and they've come to Darul Islam. So the ruling should be different for them. So the women who came like that, one of them, her name was Sa'idah, one of them name was Kulsum, and others. So that the contract, it didn't say anything about women, so they should be allowed. So the Muslims permitted them. So when these Muslim women came through, these non-Muslim women who came through and the Muslims allowed them, then these verses were revealed in regards to these women coming through, how to deal with them. Okay, so let's read the first ayah. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe, إِذَا جَاءَكُمُ الْمُؤْمِنَاتُ مُهَاجِرَاتٍ, when the believing women come to you, migrating, فَامْتَحِنُوهُنْ, so examine them. Basically, they had to be tested. Are they really Muslim, or they're just trying to run away from one husband and go to another husband? So maybe just looking for another marriage, or just getting away from an older marriage. Yes. So if that's the case, then we're not going to keep them that safety in Medina. But if they're really coming just because of Islam, so just check them, take their examination. Allahu a'lamu bi imanihin. Allah knows of their iman, and iman is something hidden in the hearts. So we won't know if these women are true, but if you give them a small test, you'll quickly find out if they're true. Like, what's the motive? Why are you here in the first place? Is it really because you love Islam? If that's the case, then they'll be allowed in, because it doesn't go against the contract. Allahu a'lamu bi imanihim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows of their iman. فَإِنْ عَلِمْتُمُوهُنَّ مُؤْمِنَاتٍ, so if you know them as believers, فَلَا تَرْجِعُوهُنَّ إِلَى الْكُفَّارِ, then so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the ruling. Since it's not even going against the contract, and the ruling is that from a Darul Kufr to a Darul Islam, if a Muslim, if a woman migrates over here, then we shouldn't return her. We have to keep her. فَلَا تَرْجِعُونَ, should be allowed to stay with the Muslims. If you see her as believers, meaning you've given her you've seen that she's sincere, she's actually turned into a believer, فَلَا تَرْجِعُوهُ, so don't return her, because she has no business in Darul Kufr. And also, by the way, the masala is off of this. Based on this ayah, the ruling, the fiqh ruling is that as well. If there's a Darul Kufr, there's a land of disbelievers, and there's a woman, she's married there, if she goes to Darul Islam, just by her going, and she accepts Islam, number one, and number two, she goes to Darul Islam, automatically her old marriage is broken. Okay, so she could go ahead and marry elsewhere. And then it says after that, لَهُنَّ حِلٌّ لَهُمْ, they're not halal for them. These women are not halal for them, and they're not halal for them. Meaning there's no point. I mean, like, there's no benefit in sending these women back. If they've accepted Islam to come here, there's no business back there, because those husbands are not legal for them anyway. From an Islamic perspective, your marriage broke. So there's no business of these women going back to Mecca. So لَهُنَّ حِلٌّ لَهُمْ, these women are not halal for them, the Meccan men. وَلَهُمْ, those Meccan men, they're not halal for them. So there's no business of them going back. وَآتُوهُمْ مَا أَنْفَقُوا, and give them what they have spent. Give them what they have spent. So some husbands came forth and said they objected. They said that our women have come, they've run away, and they've gone to Medina. And we spent on them. We spent money on them. Understand? We gave them a mahar, a dowry, and we spent this much. So here, when it says wa'atuhum, give them what they have spent, that means that these men are objecting that okay, their women have run the only thing that they don't want them back; they want their money back. So this ayah comes and says, give them the money back. So that time, so there's another ruling. So if this ever happens, even in today's time, day and age, that a Muslim woman came this way, and from the non-Muslim land, a husband objected that I spent on this lady, and she just ran to the Darul Islam. The government, the Islamic bank will fulfill those mahars. So it'll be paid by the central bank of the Muslims, whatever is owed to that man. So saying wa'atuhum, like all they're asking, they're not asking for those women to come back. They're asking for plus those women can't go back, right? They're not halal for them anyway. It's impossible anyway for her to go back. And the other is whatever, if they're objecting on what they have spent, then it says wa'atuhum manfaqu, give them what they have spent. وَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ, and there's no sin upon you إِذَا تَنْكِحُوهُنَّ, that you marry them, إِذَا آتَيْتُمُهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ, if you've given them their dowry. Meaning that now once they're here, they're going to be able to take a dowry from a Muslim man and be able to get married. But they should first pay off that, what they owe to the other husbands. And then وَلَا تُمْسِكُوا بِعِصَمِ الْكَوَافِرِ. وَلَا تُمْسِكُوا بِعِصَمِ الْكَوَافِرِ means don't marry not disbelieving women. Okay, there's a loose translation, but this will be the translation. لَا تُمْسِكُوا بِعِصَمِ الْكَوَافِرِ. Don't be in a marriage with a disbeliever. So before this verse was revealed, Muslims were allowed to marry the mushrik women and the kuffar women. So then this verse was revealed, don't marry the disbelieving women. Okay, so this is where, right when this verse was revealed, then now at this point, before this verse was revealed, even the Sahaba Ikram had their marriages with non-Muslim women as well. At this point, they are Muslims, but their marriage was with the non-Muslim women because it was allowed at that point. When this verse came, then they divorced their wives. For example, there's Omar al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Back in Mecca, he had 2 wives. So as soon as this verse "La tumsiku bi'isam al-kawafir," then he divorced both of them. And some of the other Sahaba as well. As we know, the Sahaba Ikram, right when a verse would be revealed, right? If it was something practical that you had to do, an ayah came down, they would do it right away, right? They're brave enough to take that step, no matter what. And then obviously, then even the Muslims had that, okay, that the Muslim husbands have also spent on those. So they were also allowed, the Muslim husband, that you can demand. Now, when they marry elsewhere, that they demand on that side, to the new husband, that they somehow repay that back. All the expenditure that these Muslim husbands have done on those non-Muslim wives. But what ended up happening is that the Muslims paid, but the kuffar did not pay. The Muslims held up to this fair. The Quran with the ayats, we're just trying to make it fair. It's going to go both ways. Pay whatever is left, and it comes up with even a solution in the middle. It's saying that, let's just say, there was something owed to the disbelieving man over there, or to the Muslim man over here, and so they should pay. It's hard to explain, but they should just, instead of paying that man who lost money there, pay to the woman, pay to someone over here as an exchange. They make that money go against each other, whatever is owed. So, for example, if you're demanding the kuffar to pay whatever has been spent on the woman, so if he's saying I'm not paying, then there's some money owed over here from another kafir. So then that can be set off against each other, those monies. So that's mentioned. Actually, that's mentioned in the next ayah. So it says, وَاسْأَلُوا مَا أَنْفَقْتُمْ. So ask. And they, the previous non-Muslim husbands of the Muslim women, should ask their new Muslim husbands to pay that dower which they had paid to their previous wives. وَاسْأَلُوا, so ask what you spent, and they should ask what they spent. Meaning that go ahead and ask for each other what they have spent. And it has to be set off. This has to be paid off somehow. Okay, it can go against each other. So it put like a fair system in place, that this is just like and plus it's not going against the Sulh Hudaybiyah treaty, the non-Muslim coming to Islam. That's a rule of Islam. So it created this fair system, and they go, ذَلِكُمْ حُكْمُ اللَّهِ. This is the rule of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يَحْكُمُ بَيْنَكُمْ. He judges between you with it. وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ حَكِيمٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most knowledgeable and the most wise. And then the final verse, وَإِنْ فَاتَكُمْ شَيْءٌ. I'll just go ahead and read the English translation, and then we'll look at it. It's saying something that I've already mentioned. Remember, we were saying the money goes against, like if you're missing, like you're asking for disbelieving husbands to pay up something, but they're not. So how to discharge that? وَإِنْ فَاتَكُمْ شَيْءٌ. And if some of your non-Muslim wives have slipped from you, and their present non-Muslim husbands do not pay you the dower as aforesaid, and you have your turn of paying dower to the previous non-Muslim husbands of your present wives, then instead of paying dower to them, give those whose wives have slipped the like amount of what they have paid to them, and fear Allah. I mean that whatever's owed, there's only money exchange left. So there was a fierce, like let it go against each other. Whatever needs to be paid needs to be paid. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي أَنْتُمْ بِهِ مُؤْمِنُونَ. And fear Allah, the one in whom you believe. That's it. These are the ayats. 2 ayats in regards to that Sulh Hudaybiyah treaty is done, and Sulh Hudaybiyah mentions men only. It doesn't mention women. Women are coming over. When they come over, then I gave you that ruling that whenever from Darul Kufr they do hijrah to Darul Islam, their marriage automatically breaks. Then the only thing that was left was the husbands could object that. The only thing that objection that would be left is that I spent money, I spent my dowry, it's gone. So that should be discharged either by the Baytul Mal or either by the new husbands who want to pay, who want to marry them, they will discharge it. So that money has to be paid somehow. And that's it. So these are the few verses. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to read them. Wa akhir da'wan alhamdulillah bil alameen. Subhanallah bihamdi subhanallah.